I doubt this morning if there's any Rangers fan in the land who's thinking, do you know what? Van Bronckhorst has got a point. Because to me, he doesn't. Albeit, what a group. Yes, we get that. Napoli, Ajax and Liverpool.
Yeah.
But
listen, there's no point trying to defend the indefensible. When I said at the beginning of the campaign, I think there's a real jeopardy that they'll get no points out of this competition and end up bottom with no points, which is what they've duly done. But this was a windfall. This is a moment in time. They got in because of the achievements of the side last year that took them to a European Cup final. Let's not lose sight of that. Now, even though they lost that Cup final, because of twist of fate and other teams' performances, they got into the Champions League. So it was a windfall out of nowhere. And what they've got is they've got the ability to have closed the gap financially or on Celtic, because Celtic would have got this £35 million windfall. We spoke about it at the beginning of last season at Ibrox with John Hartson and with Graeme when he was there. Graeme Souness was there and Andy McCoist was there, and they were all talking about the fact that Celtic, who was going to get this ultimate instantaneous accession into the Champions League because it was a huge advantage to one team over the other. Well, they both got it. Tragically, Rangers have not come away with much credit. To be honest with you, neither have Celtic. So it's not as if Celtic are shining this wonderful light on themselves and people can go, well, look at the two Scottish sides. Clearly, evidently, there is an economic difference between those that are competing in the Champions League, the bulk of the sides that are competing in the Champions League, and Scottish football. So whilst we want to pour onto Rangers, and I do think that Gio should have been stronger and should have called it for what it was, not good enough. It's not good enough from us. It's a learning curve, but it wasn't good enough. It's disappointing for us as it is for the fans, rather than list off a litany of reasons why it's not good enough. Injuries, 24 games, etc., etc., etc. Because nobody wants to hear that. It's a bit mealy-mouthed and a bit weak.
This sounds cruel from me, and of course, my interests are in the Scottish team, but do Scottish teams deserve, Danny, the extra automatic qualification place given to them this year? Is the extra money worth the humiliation?
Yes, because it's a progression. And if a couple of years of doing it, where the players gain experience, they get more money, more exposure, all those things, their performance should grow. We've seen that in the past. I don't think it's as big a deal as people are making out. I agree with what you both said.
It's a big deal, Danny, isn't it? If you're a Rangers supporter this morning, they're known as the worst.
What did they expect?
The worst Champions League qualification side in history.
Yeah, that's not a nice tag. And I think the manager could have just said we should have done better, that we should have been a bit more competitive, especially against Ajax. The other two teams, you could argue.
Very difficult, yeah.
But the performance is, you can go out on your sword, can't you, a little bit?
Exactly.
They didn't really do that.
I mean, he's been saying throughout the campaign they can't compete. Now, do players listen to that?
I don't think it's something he should have been saying. I don't like hearing it. I don't think it adds any benefit, doesn't give any benefit. I think it's a moment in time for Rangers where they can use, as Simon said, use the funding. Players, I know they've lost a lot of players will have learned a lot in those games. You learn sometimes more from a good hiding now and again against really good opposition than you do from winning every week in the league they play in.
It's a harsh lesson, isn't it?
It's a harsh lesson.
What did they learn being on the receiving end of 7-1 against Liverpool?
Well, see, the scoreline. Yeah, you learn some resilience. You learn that you go into games better prepared. You might. There's a million things you can learn when you play teams of that caliber and individually on the pitch against those types of players.
I mean, to be quite honest, Simon, this was the stage that Rangers really should never have been on.
No, they absolutely should be on. There's no reason to look at it and say, well, Shakhtar Donetsk have such enormous capital in the game that they should be in the mix.
I'm looking at the end result.
Well, the end result is the end result. And of course, the second half performance against Liverpool, let's not forget the first half performance was pretty good. The second half performance, Liverpool up the ante.
To be honest,
and £500 million worth of players against £50 million plus of players show.
Their first half against Napoli was pretty good, I have to say. And the sending off killed them. So they've had moments. Like Celtic did, but Celtic moments were longer and better. Celtic were competitive, I thought, in a lot of the games.
But you can't have moments in this company,
the question is was there a tacit acceptance from the manager very early in the group, or as the group progressed? They needed to have come out with a commendable performance to shut down this narrative. They needed to have looked like they were getting beat with their boots on.
The start killed them.
And the argument will be that they weren't. But when they went into the Liverpool game, in the first half, I watched the first half. Rangers were really good in the first half. Everyone was coming out in the second half feeling of optimism. I watched the Liverpool warm-up before the second half and thought, Liverpool are going to get themselves into gear here now. And no one was expecting the second half performance from Rangers. And they did capitulate, but they were playing against a side that really upped the ante, that had something to play for because they were coming off the back of a bad result previously. And they're a better side than Rangers. And it's not fair just to simply say, to categorise it as there's nothing that can be gained from this. Because there's lots that can be gained from it. Rangers would have had a £35 million, a 40% difference in the revenues between the two major clubs in Scotland. So that was a win for them. And the fact that they didn't take the European form from the Europa Cup into the Champions League is disappointing. And the fact that there was a sort of lily-livered, mealy-mouthed, not shoulders back, chest pushed out sort of battle cry from Gianni Van Bronckhorst during any stage of this tournament is the disappointment, because it's showing a certain characteristic that maybe the players latched on and they didn't have it either.
Yeah, I mean, it's strong, but it's out there. Do Scottish teams deserve the automatic qualification place given to them this year? The extra money, is it worth the humiliation? Because Rangers now, whether they like it or not, they live with the tag. They live with the tag of having set the record for the worst group stage performance in Champions League history. Rangers fans, how do you feel about that? I have a very good idea how you feel. 03717 223344 81089.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.